A new Hawkeye beer, some football news and notes. We talk basketball and we have baseball news. Plus, Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. All today, Locked On Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit us up, quick subscribe. Greatly appreciate that. If you're on the audio side, podcasting, give us a 5-star review. It greatly helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Ready to roll here for a new week. Back at it after a week in Vegas. We've been gone a lot and ready to hit the ground running here over the next few weeks leading into August camp. It is going to be an exciting time. The college football game from EA Sports is being released today. Excitement building around that. We got the Major League Baseball draft, and we got plenty of topics to get into with that one. But we open up first with the University of Iowa and a new brewery, I guess. Big Grove. If you live in Iowa City, I'm sure most everybody knows about Big Grove. If you live here in Des Moines, you now know about Big Grove, as they've been here for last year and a half or so, and doing great things with their brewery. They have been named the official craft brewery of the University of Iowa Athletics. And you might be saying to yourself, well, Trent, they already got an official beer. You got the Swarm. Remember, separate entity. NIL, that sponsorship is separate from the University of Iowa. Is this going to create histrionics? Is this going to create a controversy or maybe some disappointed people? I don't think so. Look, this is a corporate sponsorship. This is Big Grove getting involved with the university and possibly getting them in there as well in Kinnick Stadium, possibly get them in Carver Hawkeye Arena, those kind of things. It's a partnership. And these kind of collaborations happen across the board. It isn't anything that I would read into about Exile and the relationship with the Swarm Collective. I wouldn't read into it that way. Just something different. And again, we're talking about two different entities. The NIL space, that is different from the University of Iowa. Now, eventually, most everybody believes that it is going to become one entity, that it's going to come in-house, that these collectives are going to go under the watchful eye of the university and the athletic department. And eventually, I think we need to get there and get everything on the same page. But in the here and now, don't read too much into this. Let's rip through some news and notes as we get ready for football camp and the build up to this football season. Expectations are high right here in this chair, and I don't think I'm alone with that. Being in Las Vegas last week at Big 12 Football Media Day and talking to a few people there and a few of the national writers, that's really what I was looking for, is to get their perspective. Yes, I was there covering the Big 12, but you guys know me, right? We were there also to talk some Hawkeyes with some different people. And for the most part, some pretty high expectations. Now, I talked to a few people that are not huge fans of the Tim Lester hire. They believe that the way that his offense has started to slow down a little bit towards the end at Western Michigan, had some concerns, we'll just put it that way, about his ability to completely turn around this Iowa offense. Here's the thing, though, and this is what I relayed back to him in our conversation, was we're not asking for a top 20 offense. We're not even asking for a top 50 offense. Can you get this thing in the top half of college football? Is that a realistic expectation? Maybe not even year one. By year two, can you get at that level? It doesn't seem like it should be a stretch. What Iowa has done and the way that it had completely fallen apart over the last 2.5 seasons offensively, there has to be an improvement. Now, bad news, there's an extra team now at the FBS level, and that means I guess you could finish 134th in the country as opposed to 133rd in yards per play, total offense, points scored. I guess there is a way to go down, but it's not going to go down. It just can't. It absolutely can't happen this season. There's depth at the quarterback position, something that they didn't have a year ago behind Cade McNamara. I don't think the expectations for Sullivan should be real high. Talking to a few people over the last couple of weeks about him, but he's an athlete. He's a guy that can do some things physically that could certainly help this team. But the other component to this is when you talk about those expectations, what should the expectations be? Should us as fans be thinking about this is college football playoff or bust. Look, a lot of things have to go right. And we talk about the great teams over the Kirk Ferentz era and the ones that in the current structure of college football would have been playoff teams. 2004. Okay, yes, that was a great one. They also were blown out by Arizona State. Would that have been enough to get them in the college football playoff? Not exactly sure. 2002. Think of the miraculous wins that they had. Now, they hit the ground running with that win against Purdue, where they had no business winning that football game. For long stretches, they were outplayed in Kinnick Stadium against the Boilermakers. Dallas Clark had the big 90-yard touchdown, catch and run up the sideline. There were some big plays in that game. Shelton made the interception to seal it. But with all that being said, that was a game they absolutely easily could have lost that one. And there's other examples. And as you go through, just the high wire act that they went through in 2009, 2015, a lot of close calls that went their way. What if a guy just gets his hand in there against Michigan State? It's a very fine line. It already is for Iowa football. But the breaks have to go your way, not for a week, but for a stretch, and a long stretch throughout the course of the season to get those 50-50 bounces, to bounce your way 75% of the time. That's kind of the math that we're looking at for Iowa football to get to that level, to get to 10-2. And even at 10-2, which I believe with a 7-2 conference record likely won't get them into the Big Ten championship game, you're in good consideration for an at-large bid. Remember, we're talking about 12 teams that are qualifying to get into the college football playoff. And after your conference champions of the Big Four, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, and ACC, after those are off, one team from the group of five, be it Mountain West, American Athletic Conference, wherever it comes from, then you're talking about the remaining bids, and you're talking about 7 more bids then to hand out. Can Iowa be amongst those teams? Well, not if they're 10-2 and they got blown out 54-10 by Ohio State. Not if you're 10-2, but one of those losses is against a bad Northwestern team. That's the component we also look at. And if strength of schedule, and listening today to SEC football media days, and strength of schedule has already come out a bunch from a bunch of different people. If strength of schedule is the component that many people, the SEC, and I think most of the Big Ten included, want this to be a huge component, Iowa's not playing a difficult schedule this year. It's not going to be ranked very high, and we can argue the merits and what it's going to be, but that is the reality. The way that the metrics will look at this schedule will prove not to be overly difficult. Again, we're thinking pie in the sky. We're having high expectations. We're getting excited about it. However, a lot of things certainly have to go Iowa's way. Things went the way of Caitlin Clark over the weekend. Her performance in the fourth quarter on Sunday, getting the victory, was incredible, but it shouldn't come as a surprise. Now, the Minnesota Lynx coach, who is also the U.S. national coach, that lady sucks. What a terrible, just miserable human being she is. Oh, man, asking questions. How dare somebody bring up? It was Myra Metcalf of ESPN. Asked her about the national team, and she's not there to talk about that. Just a miserable, just terrible human being. How can you be just that ugly at times? Not physically. I'm talking about personality-wise. Just hideous. Absolutely brutal. Hey, but Caitlin Clark, she got the last laugh, and that Indiana Fever team now starting to play a little bit better, and certainly growing the excitement about them at minimum being a playoff team. Great to see for Caitlin Clark. And the Rookie of the Year debate, come on. Caitlin Clark is the runaway favorite, and she should be, regardless of what some of the narratives out there are about Angel Reese. We continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes. We got plenty of Hawkeye football talk coming up for you as we continue. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, he'll join us as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We're joined by Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, the Big Ten and college football national writer, along with covering the Iowa Hawkeyes. And he joins us here once again, even while on vacation. Doc, appreciate your time as always. Good to catch up. What's happening?
Hey, I'm doing well. I'm just watching these people work in this manhole and near my front yard. So I'm kind of like, I hope nothing goes too wrong today. But other than that, things are going well.
You're going to have a baby Jessica situation. Keep those kids away from there, right?
Yeah, and the feral cats in my neighborhood.
Feral cats. Oh, man. Rough living up there in North Liberty, huh? Jeez.
We've got bobcats. We've got, I guess, bears. So, things could, they're enjoying their time away from Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Doc, last week at The Athletic, you wrote a little bit about the Hawkeyes, and you talked about some of the players, the commitments for the class of 2025, some of the current guys, and after their big recruiting weekend, added 4 or 5 more guys, depending on when you consider Mason Woods a commit there. I want to start with him. LeVar Woods' son, plays over in Iowa City West, a guy that not exactly sure what he is at the next level. Is he going to be big enough and maybe tall enough to be a tight end in the Iowa scheme? Is it defensively? Is it another spot for him? What do you think about Mason Woods?
I like getting him. He's kind of one of those guys, and Iowa has really started to step up their efforts in this area where you just get him on the bus and then figure out his best spot. And in his case, he probably transitions better to a tight end than most other positions, but I also wouldn't rule out wide receiver, especially if say Teren Smith picks the Gophers over the Hawkeyes, because I think what you're going to want is you're going to need somebody in that position, and they've really struggled there. And he plays wide receiver and safety at West High, and now he's got a frame, and all you have to do is look at his dad to see what it can be, but he's got a frame that can get much bigger, and that's probably why he transitions better to whether it's a defensive end or tight end or an outside linebacker or something like that. But I do think that he's, in the right spot right now. And, first year, he's probably going to be playing scout team anyway. So they'll see what he's capable of doing. And yeah, he's probably on the track to being a tight end, but he very well could be moving to a different position if his skill set leans that way.
You mentioned the wide receiver out of Aurora, and that's Teren Smith, 6'4", 175 pounds, being your prototypical X guy, right? Out wide with the big size, the height to him to go along with it. But is that really it that they're recruiting at the wide receiver position, at least at the high school level? Which you look at Big Ten rosters, you look at scholarship numbers at other Big Ten teams. There are not many teams that are built like Iowa, and as few of scholarship wide receivers that they have. Is Smith it, basically? They're kind of putting all their eggs in that basket?
At this point, yes. That's what Iowa's looking at, is one wide receiver in this class. And I think this is what everybody's been asking for, which makes perfect sense, which is get one scholarship receiver. And then after that, check to see what's in the portal. You might have more luck there.
Yeah.
And so that makes a lot of sense for Iowa right now, probably because they've gone the traditional route. It hasn't really worked for them. And, nothing's worked in that position group for the most part. So, and then if they have got some pretty good ones that have stuck around, then they transfer. So it's really a lot of questions in that position group. So, but Teren Smith does fit the part really well. He's pretty good.
Want to ask you one other on the recruiting front for 2025. It's the quarterback in this class, in Jimmy Sullivan, a guy that he was committed before Tim Lester got the job, stayed on after the coaching change at offensive coordinator, obviously, and what's happened there. I've heard a bunch of things about Sullivan, talking to people kind of deeper in the recruiting space. Some people really, really like him. Others aren't exactly sure. What have you seen and what have you heard about Jimmy Sullivan?
I think he's a good prospect, no question. The one thing is, he's not really thought of that highly. I mean, he's not highly ranked at all for his position group. But then again, he was also the player of the year, the quarterback of the year as a junior in the biggest class in Indiana. So, he's from Fort Wayne, and that's has some really good players. I'm not sure if he's the guy that fits or not. I mean, with Iowa, you kind of have to come in with a little bit of skepticism at that position because they haven't really recruited very well. But they do see enough apparently under Tim Lester or like him enough to where they feel like he's the guy for them in the future. And as we've seen, right now they're at least their top 2 and possibly their top 3 are all transfers. So I think, for this one coming up, that's that's the one they've decided to go with early, and they've stuck with him, and we'll see. You know, the other one is they do have a walk-on coming in Ryan Fitzgerald, and I think in some ways they've made him the he's a walk-on, but he might be better than that. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a walk-on in name only, and then he might be one of the rare ones Iowa's had at that position that might be able to actually compete and earn a scholarship at some point.
You go through wide receiver, and I guess the biggest story the last couple of weeks was the arrest of Caleb Brown. We've talked about that a little bit in the past. Are you surprised, though, at this point we haven't heard a suspension, anything like that? Because normally, I know in season's a lot different than out of season and handing out a suspension. I thought we'd hear something by now from Kirk Ferentz. What do you read into that?
Nothing. I mean, this doesn't happen very often for Iowa.
Right.
So when it happens, we're jumping to conclusions on kids like this. And, he made a mistake. It's terrible. He's going to be suspended for it, but kids who get OWIs get 1 game suspensions unless something really significant happens out of that. And so it's the middle of the summer, they'll announce it, I'm sure, before the start of the first game, and, or even at Big Ten Media Days in a couple of weeks. I don't read anything into that. The only thing I read into it, Teren, is that there's not much going on, and so people want to know something.
Yeah, well, we're looking for content. You're looking for content. We're looking for content. We're always wondering, and it leads us down some different paths, certainly. Well, one path I went down with my podcast last week was, who has the most pressure for Iowa football coming up this year? So I'm going to pose it to you. You can do player. You can do coach. I think George Barnett's one of the guys that I certainly landed on, the offensive line coach, and maybe has the most pressure to build that thing up with so many returning starters coming back this year. Who is it for you? Who has the most pressure in 2024 for Iowa football?
I would say Kirk Ferentz. All these years, he's had his son. His son was the scapegoat. The offense has been terrible. The defense has been great. And if this defense, if they find a way to lose those games that they won last year, even with such a rough offense, I think then fans are going to start to really look at him and start to wonder if it's time to turn the page. I mean, if this team has the potential to win 10 or 11 regular season games and maybe get to Indianapolis or the playoff, and it also has the potential to be 7-5 and lose 3 or 4 games they could be very close and go the other way. And if that happens, in the new Big Ten with all these defensive players here, I could see it going the other way. So, that's who I would probably point at. I mean, it's too early to say that with Tim Lester, Cade McNamara. Maybe the pressure was on a little bit more last year. Him and Brian, I think it's less on now because he didn't have a complete year. He didn't have a good year. So, I would probably point to Kirk Ferentz.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a good one and a good way to look at it. You mentioned McNamara. It appears all systems go. He was playing in the softball tournament, the Iowa State softball game here a couple of weeks back. Sounds like health-wise, everything is good. What about, kind of this time of year, now that he's fully healthy, working with the wide receivers, those kind of things? What are they doing right now? And what's the importance of, before we get into August camp, what these guys are going through right now?
Right now it's just trying to develop some chemistry, and he's got some receivers he worked with a little bit. I mean, but a year ago spring he was rehabbing, so he didn't really get a chance to do much. In the summer he did, and then then he had the injury in fall camp, and then had an ACL. So now it's just about getting some sort of chemistry, especially with a new with the new offensive coordinator. And I mean, the routes are the routes. I mean, you're going to run the same types of routes. You just may cut them off differently and do some things differently there. But I think just developing some sort of bond and chemistry with the receivers and working out, and then hanging out, because football season is a long season. It's a grueling grind. So I'm sure it's for him, it's about, getting some, trying to build the chemistry while also clearing your mind.
Two more with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Doc, you mentioned Big Ten football media day as I get ready to head to Big 12 coming up here in a couple of weeks for the Big Ten. Who are going to be the representatives you think that are going to be tagging along with Kirk Ferentz, taking the private jet out to Indianapolis?
I hate guessing these because sometimes I guess who I want, and sometimes who I think they're going to get. I mean, last year's representatives included Luke Lachey and Jay Higgins, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if those two were going again. And then there's the third one is kind of up in the air. I would say Deontay Craig has a really good opportunity. He's from Indianapolis. I'd say Sebastian Castro should have every consideration. Really good story, the Chicagoland area. I would say Mason Richmond, being a 4-year starter at left tackle and gone through something more. Same thing with Logan Jones, being a 3-year starter at center. I think all of those. And then there's, of course, the one I would probably want to see, and I think most people would, be Kate McNamara. I'm sure there would be some real interest in him. But I would probably lean towards somebody like Sebastian Castro as being the third one to go along with Jay Higgins and Lachey.
Oh, good stuff there. Well, Doc, appreciate your time joining us on vacation. So a fun vacation or a staycation back home?
Yeah, I'm leaving later this week. Me and my son are going to Mississippi. He's joining the AmeriCorps.
Oh, wow.
So we're driving to Vicksburg, and we'll be back a week from Tuesday. So, I'm taking a little bit of extended time here while I can. And so, he'll be gone for almost a year. So, we're going to be out and about and be back a week from Tuesday.
Well, safe travels to you, Doc, and we will talk to you when you get back. Appreciate it as always.
All right. Thanks, Trent. Appreciate it.
That's Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at Scott Dochterman, writing about the Iowa Hawkeyes, the Big Ten, and college football as a whole now, and his new role with The Athletic. Well, as you could hear last week, that was a conversation with Scott Dochterman, and we do know who is going to Big Ten Football Media Days. It will be a return for Luke Lachey and Jay Higgins, as we talked about last week. Quinn Schulte, the new be there. Great stuff as always from Scott Dochterman. Always appreciate the time he gives us. A lot of great content on Iowa football. We continue. We got a busy week ahead of you. Plus, what's happening in baseball? The draft continues, and taking some tough ones for the Hawkeyes. Brody Brecht is a Rocky. We'll talk about that a little. Iowa baseball as we continue. Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So Brody Brecht, the Iowa baseball player, has been selected by the Colorado Rockies. Now, went a little bit lower than I know many pundits out there believed. The control still remains an issue, and that is one of the concerns. We saw the walk rate continue to be very high, and he gets drafted by a place that is not friendly to pitchers by any means, when you're talking about obviously what happens in Colorado. However, there is, I know, for some hope that potentially maybe Brody Brecht will come back for his final seasons of eligibility in a Hawkeye uniform and that everything's going to be okay. Don't hold your breath. The likelihood that we're going to see Brody Brecht come back in an Iowa uniform is incredibly slim. We know that he has big time money. The slotted value of the 38th pick is well north of $2 million. You have that component of it. That's going to be difficult to turn down. A slot value of $2.4 million. Now, he also does have in his back pocket the ability to press Colorado just a little bit here. And with the option to come back for Iowa as a senior, maybe they'll have to pay over that slot value coupled with them being Colorado and try to get starting pitching. Yeah, that can't be a bad thing. I don't think, at least for the agent of Brody Brecht, trying to make that one happen. Now, we anticipated this was going to be the case. Again, we're talking about less than a % chance, I believe, that Brody Brecht's going to be back in a high school, in an Iowa uniform. Out of high school, Joey Oakie. Saw Joey play. In fact, just saw him play a couple weeks ago, calling a game for Ankeny Centennial when they were over in Urbandale. He's a stud. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So he was just drafted earlier today in the MLB draft. He was taken in the 3rd round and got the call, and he is going to a great place. As bad as Brody's selection was, having to go to Colorado in that organization, and ultimately, if he makes the major leagues, where it would go for him, Joey Oakie going to Cleveland. The Guardians' development of pitching, starting pitching, relief pitching, all of it is absolutely amazing. It's some of the best in the game, and it has been that case for the better part of a decade now. They've been incredibly good at building prospects up and what they do on getting these guys ready to go. The slot value for the 84th pick, that's what Joey Oakie went, is just shy of $1 million, $906,000. Oh boy, that is going to be, again, very, very difficult to see him showing up in an Iowa baseball uniform. And that's not all. Sam Petersen's also been selected today, the big-time bat for the Hawkeyes. So their blows, we anticipated they would all happen. However, that one stings just a little bit. Coming up this week, Locked On Hawkeyes, we got more conversations with some of the Iowa media members, including John Bowenkamp's going to be stopping by later. Tom Kaker from HawkeyeReport.com. We're going to make our first installment. We've gotten away from what we did last summer, Throwback Thursdays, and we're going to be taking a look back at some of the great teams in Iowa history. We got that coming up on Thursday and some great memories. Plus, we start to preview everything going on with this Iowa football team. We'll start going position by position and a deep dive of all the players on the roster and what we expect for them coming up in the 2024 season. It is a busy one. We're with you, your team every day here on the Locked On Network. We have you covered on the Hawkeye front with Locked On Hawkeyes. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day on your TV? Do you have to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Well, it's time to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Hope everybody enjoys your Monday. Baseball draft will continue. There's potentially some new names that are going to be coming into the fray on that front. Some guys possibly coming back. A lot to go on. Basketball, football. We got you covered. Your team every day. Maybe a little even wrestling content in the offseason. Hey, why not? Love to be here with you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.